Hello and welcome back to another Discovery review, episode 4. Yes, I always feel like this will confuse someone if they're new. Like they'll click on the video and they'll be like, "Oh, I'm not on episode 3. I'm looking for episode 4." But yes, anyway, it's one of those videos where I'm already a bit tired, so I won't spend too long on this intro. Episode 4, All Things Are Possible, I think it's called, or something like that. Also, the last episode of Discovery for a little bit, and then quite a while, to benefit from being directly after a Chris Chibnall Doctor Who episode. Which matters because whenever one of Chris Chibnall's seasons of Doctor Who is on, then anything else I watch with even the most basic display of storytelling 101 ability is some sort of amazing revelation worthy of praise and attention. So, I'm curious if my opinion of Discovery is gonna nosedive after this episode. But then again, it didn't do too much for the last episode of Discovery, did it? Which was one of those great journeys and then an absolute dumpster fire. So hopefully, we had great journey dumpster fire. Let's hope we have another great. Let's not do a 2-2 pattern. Let's just knock it out of the park, guys. Come on. Try and restore some of my faith in the heart. Yeah, without further ado, let's get into the episode that isn't released yet. Whew. No, that was a pretty good episode of Discovery. It actually felt a lot like the first 2 episodes of this series, or at least how I remember them. And that they were good, solid episodes of Star Trek. But there were still the hints of what I have been calling Discovery, but what I think I now have to redefine is old Discovery. Because Discovery isn't really Discovery anymore, if that makes sense. Everything that season 1 and 2 was the show that was Discovery. And that season 3 was pulling away from, not quite pulled away from, but pulling away from, Discovery. Between, the half of season 3 that was good, and then what we're seeing in season 4, I think I have to say the old Discovery, and not Discovery. What do I mean by that? Well, I was actually happy. I did a little laugh to myself, because Discovery has been trying Star Trek, and episodic Star Trek, enough now that we're finally hitting the tropes. We got a shuttlecraft of random people crash landing on the planet that's just right there, of course, because there's always a planet next to you in space. We've done it. We're hitting the Star Trek tropes. Sure, someone's probably come up and gonna point out that one episode from season 2 where they did hit the Star Trek tropes. And no, I don't think a time loop is quite a Star Trek trope yet, but still, I like it. We're doing it. We got our second episode. Actually, no, this was an entirely episodic episode, I think. It had some of that modern character serialization, but no, we've got now 2. In 4 episodes, we have 50% serialization rate. And even then, actually, last episode was super serialized as well, wasn't it? There's a 75% serialization rate in this season of Discovery. Sorry, the episodic rate. The serialized has always been kind of woven into little bits. And honestly, usually it's the bits of the episode I'm not as keen on. But I'm really liking the direction they're taking Discovery in. It's just so those little ticks. Because what did we have? Well, we had a Michael Burnham is the center of the universe. I'll go into detail way more on all of these. But we had the Michael Burnham is the center of the universe and everything revolves around her. In, well, of course, I'm going to represent Ni'Var on this council. We had a little bit of kind of messing with Federation values and stuff in, you mean they couldn't just leave? Anyways, and yeah, the little bits, but around that, no, it was just a good episode of Star Trek, I think. Let's start with, I think, the Ni'Var plotline, where I was really weird when they talked about we want the ability to leave the Federation unconditionally at any time, the exit clause, and I was like, you couldn't? It's hard not actually being able to read the Federation Constitution. There are times it makes sense that you couldn't leave the Federation. For example, a wartime. I could see it being no, you can't leave the Federation. But it's hard to imagine what exactly the exit clause is, because it almost felt like Ni'Var was asking for a snap our fingers, okay, we're out now, which is just a bad idea. There's a reason in the real world, when the UK left the EU, or when countries divide, and independent stuff happens, it's not a snap our fingers, okay, we're brand new. It's a, all right, the decision's been made, and now we spend several years easing into that, is because I guess the galaxy as a whole already kind of has a standard currency in Latinum, but you have to do the things like, all right, well, we've now got to restrict travel. You know, you can't just travel or work in any Federation world. You got to give time for, like, families to move apart, and it like, you can't just snap your fingers and be like, all right, we're out. You can just kind of snap your fingers and go, all right, we're pulling out of the Federation. As they said, you have Ni'Var. Like, they already voted and be like, all right, we're done. Like, you can just leave the Federation. They don't force you in, and so I was kind of confused on what an exit clause is adding. And I was also confused on why the Federation was so hard against it. Like, I would have been maybe like, okay, I guess, but maybe could we sit down and be like, if we're in a war or some sort of major crisis, you know, like this dark matter thing, right? Like, if we're in a major crisis, maybe we can lay out some ground rules and be like, well, you can't actually leave now because that's damaging to everyone. And it just felt a bit weird that, like, first off, a clause was needed when we know for a fact you can just leave the Federation, and that, like, the Federation would be so against it. So against it to the point of not even like, well, you know, can we at least bring up, like, how do you feel about these, and just be like, nope, we're done. Why were they in orbit around Ni'Var for, like, several weeks if they weren't a part of the conference? No, you know, never mind. That being said, I liked Burnham's proposal, because it was like, well, at first I thought she was basically describing the Federation Council. Like, well, yeah, of course you have a voice in the Federation. But then I was like, oh no, yeah, this is a different thing I could see not having come up. Like, can you imagine Archer and those folks sitting down and being like, oh, you know, let's have this committee to review membership? Like, of course not. Everyone wants to be in the Federation at that point. Like, that's why the Federation came to be. And I liked it all. I was like, oh yeah, this makes sense. This seems reasonable. Up until the point of, and obviously I'll do it. Because I was like, no, you're actually the worst person to do it, aren't you? Like, for one, you're not actually separate from Federation government. Imagine if the United States Supreme Court, whose express purpose is to be separate from politics, like, you know, it's why they have also lifelong term, like, they were designed to be uninfluenced by, like, all politics and parties and everything. Imagine if the Supreme Court people could only be active members of the military. No. just no. Well, the more I was thinking about it after the episode, there is a certain logic to having a citizen of the planet who is also has a vested interest in that planet staying in the Federation. I'm not saying Burnham is the right person, because I think they're very disconnected from Ni'Var. Because, like, that person is not going to have the final say of whether their planet leaves the Federation or not, right? Their goal is to find a compromise between the Federation and the planet. So, in theory, someone who is a citizen of the planet and very connected and cares for it and wants to represent them in the Federation, who also has personal reasons to really want that planet in the Federation, is perfect. Because they're going to really try and find a compromise, and then also they understand, like, sort of the culture of the planet and whatever, but they still have to turn it into the government and be like, how does this work? And they can be like, no, like, their biases aren't really gonna affect that final decision. Like, the problem is, though, I feel like it's a better role for, you know, get a diplomat, or, like, the actual planet assigns a representative. I'll tell you what is, it's the reserves in America, the tribal reserves all over America. A lot of them send, or I think the nations, maybe it's just the nations, but, you know, a lot of them will send representatives to Congress or the Senate, whatever. I'm not an expert on that side of American politics. I assume those tribes, like, choose the people. Congress isn't just like, well, you know, we found someone in the military who's of your tribe, like, they can be representing your tribe, even though they don't live there, and in fact live in a military base in Germany. It's like, well, that doesn't feel right. Like, yeah, that's someone who's very attached to the tribe, but, you know, they're also, I can see some conflict of interest there. And so, yeah, it just annoyed me a bit of Burnham's the center of the universe. It's like, that's not gonna come up again, right? Like, that doesn't feel like we'll ever see it again. How much ruling of Kaminar has Saru done? I think he mentioned he had a meeting later, and that's like all he's done. But even then, it would feel more like plot servicing the story and not the story unfolding naturally. But, you know, it wasn't super egregious. It just wasn't literally perfect. Hopping over to the Tilly plot, I think we'll do. I was a bit upset at how the Tellarite, I think it was a Tellarite, those redesigns, like their racism wasn't really put down. Is like he was kind of like, the Emerald Chain, you know, did all this bad stuff to me, until he was like, yeah, okay, I get it. But if you ever asked him his story with the chain, like, no, that's like half the answer. That's like, yeah, look, the Emerald Chain did really awful things, and so the people in charge of that Emerald Chain, you know, you have all the right to feel that way about those people and those captains and stuff. But like, you absolutely, especially as a Starfleet officer, like as a person, yes, but as like a Starfleet officer and a cadet and one under my command, remember in Balance and Terror when whatever lieutenant made some, like, he wasn't even really racist in the sense that he was like, well, racist. He was more like insinuated or made like a bit of a comment that could be interpreted as racist. And Kirk grabbed his chair, spun him around, and just said,
well, here's one thing you can be sure of, mister. Leave any bigotry in your quarters. There's no room for it on the bridge. Do I make myself clear?
Unless you're Bones. And that, you know, I want a scene like that. Like, exactly what she did, but way more forward, and be like, no. And maybe it turns out that, like, that guy is basically a Nazi, an Orion Nazi, but this is also an Orion who's chosen to join Starfleet. And you don't choose to join Starfleet unless you believe in Starfleet values. And Starfleet values are very much not the Emerald Chain. It was also weird to me when they were like, oh, his father was like the ultimate Orion MLK or something. And I say, have you ever heard about Hitler's like cousin or something, I think it was, who was an American police officer who heard about, well, basically Hitler, and then he joined up for World War II, like, and was very actively against Hitler as a Hitler himself. Donald Trump has like a sister or a cousin or something who I'm pretty sure is pretty liberal and like actively against the Trump family. Can I come up with a liberal counterexample? Like a liberal who has a really conservative family member? No. I'm sure they exist, but no, I can't. So yeah, I don't know. I felt that could have been a little better. I mean, it's not like they were bad. I mean, it was a racism is bad storyline. Like, you can't really fault the message. I also found it weird they had the human was kind of the one to first respond with that and be like, oh, gee, I'm sorry. I'm like, were you racist too? Maybe you had some preconceptions challenge. I could get that. You'd be like, I probably haven't been viewing this person as equal as I should, but also, like, you weren't the Tellarite. I also felt they weren't really all, like, raw teamwork as maybe they could have been at the end. Like, at the end, Tilly was like, oh yeah, they're ready now. We've solved the teamwork problem in Starfleet. But I was like, are they really though? Like, they're probably a bit better after this. But I feel they'll still maybe go through their lessons and like not being very teamwork. And then maybe they'll sit down and be like, you know what, actually, maybe this is something I do need to work on. Like, you haven't fixed the problem. You've just kind of started the ball rolling. I probably sound a bit more negative on this episode than I think it was. When it comes to the problems with an episode, you have this much to talk about. When it comes to, yeah, that was nice. Yeah, that was nice. I do really love, though, Dr. Culber being Dr. Culber, and I don't know why. The way he looks, the way he acts on the ship, like, the competency that he does his work. I don't know, I just really love watching Dr. Culber do his thing. Was he even in a medical outfit? I feel like he kind of did the whole thing in just really casual wear and his nice, cozy... He hangs out in the bar in his cozy room. It's great. I don't know. I really love that. It's the same with Suru. Like, Suru in the Ni'Var President. I should really learn her name. Like, I just love those scenes. And I don't know why those are the ones that are really speaking me to these episodes. They are. They like it. I mean, that's kind of what I want to do. Because I feel like maybe it's that they're all really easygoing. I feel they're just, like, having mature... somewhat philosophical discussions, just lounging around cozy places. Look great, they're wearing comfy stuff. I mean, it's like, I could do that for the next 80 years. I want to do that for the next 80 years. That sounds great. Every scene they're in, I feel like there should be the noise of a fire crackling in the background. That's what I want, and I think that's what I like. And I love the Ni'Varian aesthetic, would it be? Just everything about as I've said, the overall design, but I've really loved the Ni'Var stuff as well. I've always loved Vulcan aesthetics. They've done a great job pushing Vulcan into the future while keeping it very Vulcan. And I think it's even better and more Vulcan than season 1 and 2 Vulcan was, which is kind of weird because they're very similar aesthetics. I think it might just be the placement in the timeline. If I'm like, Vulcan shouldn't really look like this in the 23rd century. 31st, 32nd century, it's great. And I really like what they're doing with Book. It's the execution. So before I said, like, O'Brien's, 20 years in prison, goes to therapy off screen, he's just better. That's fine. And usually I'm not really a fan of sitting around with those problems in television. But I think the execution of Book's whole arc, like, it makes sense. Like, there's never been a part of Book's thing where I've gone, this is weird, this doesn't make any sense, which is very common for stuff like this. But it's very believable. Feels very real. It's like, oh, he's better now. Like, he's very much better. But then he's kind of going down now. He's having, like, those wobbly days after his perfect day. I'm just really liking Book stuff and everything about how they're handling that. Like, if there's an arc I think I could watch for the 13 episodes, it's probably Book, which is good because they've made it sort of hit the main arc. And I think what's really impressive is that for like the first time off the top of my head, it's actually I blame myself that I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, it's not like Book's to blame for the death of his brother and nephew, but Book's whole argument of, I could have brought them on my ship, I probably should have brought them on my ship. If I brought them on my ship, they would still be alive. And the fact that I didn't bring them on my ship is the reason they're dead. I'm like, yeah. I remember even when that scene happened, he's like, find cover or something. I went, no, your ship's probably the best point of cover. And if you think about that, with only the information we knew at the time, of course, that Book knew, rather. Like, we knew the anomaly was headed to Quajon, and we could kind of figure from opening credits they're gonna destroy it. There's a very clear choice in that matter. Even it's unsaid, it's all thought of and like done in half a second in his head. But do I tell them to find cover or something, or do I take them on my ship and take them with me to Discovery? There are risks to both. There's no clear right answer. Of course, on the planet, there's like earthquakey stuff going on. They could get hurt by an earthquake or something. There could be some damage there. Or whatever the problem is could be something to come into Quajon. Alternatively, if I bring them on my ship, they're as safe as I am. They're not on Quajon, which is having that earthquake, but I'm also heading to Discovery. I'm heading likely into danger, into the source of this problem eventually. If he knew Discovery was in the area investigating a problem with the space station, he knew he's bringing them into that risk. Like, it was a choice he chose wrong. And it's results-oriented thinking to, say Book is to blame, but it's right to say Book's decisions directly led to his family's death, and only Book's decisions led to that family's death. And he's not really beating him up so much over the, it's my fault. Like, he's aware it's his fault. He's aware he could have made another choice to save his family, but he's also seems to be aware he didn't do anything wrong. He just made the wrong choice between two equally valid choices, and he's not gonna be a results-oriented idiot, and therefore everything is wrong. There's no reason I ever should have left them behind. And so that's great. Because otherwise, if you couldn't believe what Book was feeling, then it would be a season 1 of Michael Burnham started the Klingon War. Well, no, she absolutely didn't. And I talked about that before in my big review. We're good. In my big review of seasons 1, 2, and 3. I'm also pleasantly surprised. I called Tilly was leaving Starfleet to teach, so, still in Starfleet. I like that I called that, but what I'm actually surprised at is that it was this episode. Like, I would be shocked if we don't see Tilly again. But I'd be very surprised if we see her more than, like, 3 episodes. In 9 episodes, we see her 3 episodes. Yeah, like, I'd be curious how much more of an impact she has on the show. Like, Saru's come back. He's been in the whole show since he left, but you can't do that with Tilly. I mean, as someone who's just spent a lot of time in remote classes, like, in theory, you could, but it detracts from her decision to leave. It makes less of an impact of, like, that big goodbye and stuff, And as Tilly said, like, yeah, you'll still see me every now and then. She said Fed HQ, never say Fed HQ again. Oh, I did like as well the little thing that the human in the episode was some Titan, which shows that like Titan and Earth are working together, like from that season 3 episode, without actually kind of having to tell us. I think I'm just gonna hop into the scene by scene now and see what jogs my memory. He did. He's dressed there in his little Steve Jobs. I think, by the way, whoever did the sets for season 3, especially in Culber's room, I was thinking, I want to hire that person to do the next TARDIS. Because a lot of it, like, look, you've even got the little round thing. Like, there was a lot, whatever's behind Culber really felt like a TARDIS to me. And I'm like, I kind of want to see that person do a TARDIS. Because, you know, it wouldn't just look like Discovery, of course, but I'd love to see what they could do. Weirdly enough, though, Discovery, the interior, is probably the most like 13's TARDIS, the current TARDIS, the crystally one, which is my least favorite TARDIS of all time. So that's kind of funny. I really like Gray as a couple, which is a weird sentence. Adira feels like the writers trying to create someone like me as a character. And I like Adira, but there's a lot of the awkwardy sort of bits that, what's the face they make? It's the I'm trying not to smile, I'm kind of nervous. You know, it's the Adira face that, it's entirely me. Nothing wrong with the character. I think it's a reaction I'm having that it's like me, but not. Even like a younger version of me, but not. It's putting me off some things a bit. So I'm not sure. I love Gray as a couple. Is a thing. I'm not entirely sure about all of their couple scenes together. They've got a lot of nice, cute stuff. I don't know. My reaction to that is interesting. But I think Gray does have a lot of. Like, I love when they shoved Adira out the door. That whole scene, that was what I liked with Adira. But then it was like the very much like, my partner's an idiot. A look I'm very accustomed to. I'll let you figure out which way around that goes. You've got Cronenberg back, who is still just kind of some guy who's there. Is he in charge of the academy? That might have just clicked with me. That's not what he would have been in season 3. He was just kind of a weird guy who was sort of there. A lot of people thought he was the Federation president. I call him Cronenberg because I think that's what people on the Reddit called him. He's like, either that was the actor's name or he played a famous character called Cronenberg. Something like that. Someone will let me know. I don't know who he is. He's just some weird guy who's just in the Federation headquarters. Like, I want to know more about him, but not in a I'm intrigued kind of way. Just like, he's kind of weird being just some guy. He's not even some officer. He's just some guy in a suit. Also, there was an establishing shot at some point of these shuttles flying into the shuttle bay, and I could have sworn I was watching the Orville. Like, they're very Orville shuttles. They don't have, like, the 2 rings, warpy rings I think the Orville has, but it's a very Orville shuttle. It just consciously occurred to me, that's the old Starfleet uniform. Which is weird to say because it's the second newest Starfleet uniform in history. But it's the old version, the gray one, which I knew it was different. I saw him and he was different, but it just kind of consciously clicked to me. I liked a lot of the uniforms in this season. It is weird, because I mentioned before, it feels like the 80s, 90s maybe, where, like, you had to have all those different versions of the characters so you can sell the action figures. I really love the dress uniforms in this, like, the texture, the color. I've loved a lot of the Starfleet uniforms coming out of this season, and a lot of the uniforms in general, some of them I'm not as huge a fan of. I mean, they're functional, but I'm maybe not a fan of how often they change it, like that 80s action figure-y thing. But, like, I love that dress uniform and the standard uniform and the casual wardrobe. Again, that's all cozy stuff. Really loving that. I did find they had a bit of a leap in logic, it almost felt, when they were like, oh, we must be here. Like, do you really believe Admiral Vance is sick? Why wouldn't you? Is that really weird? I know it's a 32nd century, but, like, sicknesses, you still have the doctors. No, that was the Discovery. The very first time they landed in the 32nd century, got to the Federation HQ, they were dealing with a sickness. And, like, he's a Federation admiral. He's the Federation admiral. He, like, probably gets around a lot, talks to a lot of aliens, and a lot of admirals in the past have been sick because of talking with aliens. It was a plot point in a TNG episode that a guy had, like, Cardassian ringworm or whatever. And so they knew he was dealing with Cardassians. Like, bit of a leap there. It's probably the best the show's gotten to get me to dislike the president. The Federation one, specifically. But at the same time, it's also the hardest at the end. They've tried to get me to like the president. And I realized as well, actually, presidents reminded me that I felt it a bit weird. Like maybe three-fourths the way through the episode, I remembered the episode's title is All Is Possible, which kind of killed a lot of the tension because I'm like, oh, well, all is possible. Like Ni'Var's gonna join, everyone's gonna survive. Well, except Red Shirt. Like a much better episode would have been something vague. Like the struggle. I don't know, something weird. That nothing bad has ever been named the struggle. I wonder if actually the season arc of Discovery, and I think is where they're taking it now, is all is possible. Where the open of the season was the Kobayashi Maru, there are no win scenarios. That was the opening argument. And so your closing argument has got to be some sort of reflection on that. And especially doing pandemic stuff, I doubt they're going to do actually, yeah, you can't win it all. I think they're actually going to do what I was talking about in that review of, no, it's the Kirk lesson of, I don't believe in no-win scenarios. If you want to try and tell me that the Wrath of Khan is the no-win scenario, like, yeah, I know that's how it was written, and that was the intended moral. But I ask you, what is Star Trek 3? If the Wrath of Khan is a no-win scenario, what is Star Trek 3? And then Star Trek 4. Like, that was a pretty big win in my books. Again, ignoring the red shirts, but they're red shirts. I think their point is to be ignored. There's a difference between television making a point and actually people have died here. I've just had a thought, this is the wrong scene, but when the worms were attacking the first time, Tilly was like, someone grab a tricorder. And Adira was the one who popped their badge up, because, it's all merged in one. And I thought it was a bit weird. I was like, why do you call it a tricorder if it's a badge? I've just realized that's the boomer thing of Tilly is the old 900-year-old woman who's like, someone grab a tricorder. And it's the three cadets who are like, what the hell is a tricorder? But Adira's the one who's like, oh, tricorder, they're all, they mean the badge thing, and just, yeah. That's not the image I said I was gonna pause on. I was gonna in a happy Tilly face. But anyway, I think we're gonna call it here. That was good. Still not ready to declare Discovery as good yet, but I'll just acknowledge it. I just won't declare it. They need to do a bit more before it's declared. But yeah, that was good. I'm liking Discovery. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. 45 minutes of recording. Hopefully we've hit a more reasonable thing and something that will upload within 24 hours. But yeah, I think that's it from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.